Hello again, you fantabulous Godot people. In this video, we're going to make bystanders. Now, bystanders in our game are going to be obstacles to shoot. They're going to be things that we don't really want to hit. We're not going to get a penalty for them. They're just going to get in the way. So, our bystanders are going to have the following rules. They're going to be unanimated. They're not animated. They're going to be static figures that fly past. They're going to be randomly selected from a pool that we're going to create, and we're going to use our file grabber to use them. And they're going to be spawned on a semi-random basis, which is a really useful phrase. Here, semi-random just means we're going to have a maximum time and a minimum time, and Godot's going to pick an integer between those two. So, first thing I want to do is make some bystanders. Now, these are going to be rigid bodies, so I'm going to make a brand new scene. And the root node is going to be a rigid body, and I'm going to call this bystander. Let's just check my spelling on that. Bystander, fantastic. And I'm going to save this scene before I go any further in its own folder. I'm going to call this bystanders. Bystanders. Having trouble typing again. Great. Now, later on, I'm going to have a folder full of these bystanders, and they're going to have a script, and I need those two things in a separate place. So I'm going to create a new folder called bystander figures. And I'm going to put it in there. Okay, now Godot has given me a warning. It wants a collision shape. But before I give it a collision shape, I want to know what to draw the collision shape around. So let's give it a mesh instance. So I'm going to add a mesh instance. And if we go down to models and we go to bystanders, you're going to see all these meshes. So I'm just going to pick the first one, drop it in there. Or at least I would do. Boop. And there is a lovely bystander. It looks a bit tall, doesn't it? It is a bit tall. This needs to be about half the size. You'll also notice, look where the origin is, right? So the physics is going to apply here, which means when we hit it, it's going to spin around randomly. So I'm going to move the mesh instance down. Before I move the mesh instance down, I'm going to scale it, not the bystander, just the mesh instance. And the reason I'm not scaling the bystander is scaling physics objects leads to some really unpredictable results. So I'm going to scale the mesh. And let's say 0.5. Which should be around the right height. We could check that in a minute. And what I'm going to do is give it its collision shape. Collision shape. And this is going to be a capsule shape, which I'm going to rotate by 90 degrees on the red, which is the X. Okay, I'm going to have to resize that. But again, you'll notice, look where the mesh is. Let's move the mesh down. Now the mesh is about 1 meter up, because it's 2 meters tall. So 1 meter puts it right in the center there. Okay, so let's resize this collision shape. I'm going to go here. I say resize. I'm going to change the X stance. So the radius is going to be, let's say, 0.5. That's radius of 0.5, so diameter of 1 meter. Looks pretty good. And you know what? The height isn't too bad, is it? Yeah, we'll leave the height there. A couple of other things I'm going to do. Back to the rigid body. I'm going to turn the gravity off. And the reason is these are going to float along once they're fired. They're going to be fired from a spawner. They're going to float in a straight line until they hit something, and then they're going to react. We're going to need a couple more things. One is a visibility notifier. So visibility notifier. Now here we're using an AABB rather than the transform. I'm going to scale it. Let's say a scale 0.5. And all I'm going to do here is send a signal if this goes off camera. This is bookkeeping. I don't want a bunch of bystanders staying on screen forever. If you fly off screen for any reason, you're going to vanish. Now, this does mean if I look at the bystander, look away, and come back, the bystander will be gone. But a game this fast, I don't mind that. I think it's fine for this particular game, but you might disagree. There's a couple of other things we want to do. One, when this bystander is hit, the bystander is going to let us know. And for that, I'm going down to my sound effects. I've got a nice sound effect that I've professionally made just for you. So I'm going to add in an audio stream player. And I'm going to drag in this stream. Now before we go any further, go to import and just double check that loop is off. Trust me on this. And remember, any change you make on this screen, you must hit re-import or it won't stick. Let's listen to this very professional sound.
Oh no!
Yes, that was me. You're very welcome. One more time.
Oh no!
That feels pretty good. It also feels a little loud, so I'm going to turn that down. Now, hopefully I've remembered to turn down the volume on your side for the edit, but on my side, it's a little loud. And yeah, I think that works great. I am going to put the Doppler on for the physics, so the sound will change as the distance changes. And one more thing. When this bystander is hit, I want it to vanish after a while. So what I'm going to do there is add in an animation player. Now I don't have to do an animation player. I could do this with a timer. When you're hit by a projectile, start the timer. When the timer is over, do some things. But I want this to fade a little bit. So what I'm going to do is make a brand new animation. I'm going to call it die. And let's bring in some tracks. So the first thing I'm going to bring in is the you know what? First thing I'm going to bring in is the audio stream player. Let's make a key and play it. And re-add that key. And the reason I'm doing that is I can see the length of the animation. Now I know this sound is 1.2 seconds long, so I'm going to make this a 1.3 second animation. I happen to know that. You can double check it if you just double click on it, and you can see the length down here in the bottom right. However, that's not what we're doing right now. Okay, so when we start this animation, it'll play the sound.
Oh no!
But we want a few other things. Other thing I want is I want to go to mesh instance, and I'm going to make a key for the scale. And let's say at half a second, it still has that same size. So I'm going to make a new key.
Oh no!
And at the very end, let's put this scale at 0.01 on all three axes and add that key. It still exists, it's just too small to see. That's silly. Let's add a track and do call method. I'm going to call the method on the root, on the bystander. And I'll right click, insert key, and this is going to be cue free. So when this animation is played, it'll play the sound. Halfway through, it'll start shrinking us down a bit.
Oh no!
And then it'll, I'm going to put this right here. You know what, I'm going to put it slightly earlier. There we go. And then it'll remove the entire body from the scene. So I'm going to put this right back here.
Oh no!
A little annoying. Okay, before we finish with this basic bystander, I'm going to wire in some signals. So to do that, I need to make a script. And remember, I told you to put things in bystanders figures, because I don't want this script to be part of the file grabber stuff. So I'm going to go back up to bystanders and save bystander GD in there. All right, so let's take visibility notifier. I'm going to add a signal on camera exited. So when you've exited the camera's view, what do we want to do? Well, we're going to go back to bystander, and this is nice and easy. This is just cue free. One more thing we're going to do, we're going to have a function called hurt, which is going to be called by the projectile. And when you're hurt, you're just going to play die, because that's the only animation we have. And that's that done. Now, currently, I have one bystander. So I have a challenge for you. I would like you to create at least 2 more bystanders. I would use new inherited scene, and remember to put all of your new bystanders in the same folder, and that folder should have nothing but those scenes in it, so that we can use our file grabber GD on them. So pause the video, give that a shot, and when you come back, I'll show you how I do it, and then I'll fast forward so you don't have to watch me do it all those times. And welcome back. All right, so what do we have? Well, we have a new inherited scene from bystander, and I'm going to go back up to the bystander models. I'm going to go to the mesh, and I'm going to drag in, oops, not to the signals. There we go. I'm going to drag in the second one right there, and everything else should stay the same. And I'm going to call this bystander 2, and I'm going to save scene as bystander 2. At which point I could go new inherited scene again and copy the whole thing, or I could just drag them back to, oops, select the mesh, drag them back to here, call this one bystander 3, and save scene as. So rather than make you watch me do it, and if you're wondering why the fade is there, I kept messing up the phrase, rather than make you watch me do this, I'm going to do a nice little clock wipe. It's going to be very fancy, and then I'm going to put the rest of these in. And this feels like a good place to bring you back, just as I do the very last one. And I'm going to call this bystander 12. I misspelled a couple of those, but that's not actually critical. I can fix that in a minute. Save scene as bystander 12. And we now have them all saved. So I'm going to close that. And you know what? I'm going to close the bystander. Just make sure that these aren't too badly named. Nope, they're fine. Okay, so we have bystanders. Now what I need is a spawner. While I'm here, I'm going to move the player out the way, because I'm going to spawn these and have them cross the center here. So let's just move the player spawn back to here. At this stage in development, the player will be able to cross this line. Later on, I'll probably change that. But what I'm going to do is make a brand new scene. And this is going to be a basic spatial node, and I'm going to call this bystander spawner. And I'm going to save this somewhere. I'm not going to save it in bystanders. I'm going to save it in the bystander figures. I'm going to save it in the bystanders folder. That's a good place for it. And let's give it a simple mesh instance. The game doesn't need one, but I need one. I need to see where this goes. So I'm going to give it a mesh instance, and that's going to be a basic cube. So let's give it a new cube mesh, the size of 1 meter on each axis. And just for the fun of it, I'm going to give it a nice cyan color, so it's very easy for me to see. Now, the player should never see this, but at this stage in development, I want this to be visible. While we're here, let's give this a couple more things. I need a timer, because we need to spawn these at a random time, and I need to know what forward is. So I'm going to do the same trick with position 3D. Now, it's supposed to be facing on the z-axis, which is the blue lines. I'm going to move that forward by 2, just so when I'm placing this, I can see where it lives. Let's save that, and just to see what that looks like before it actually does anything, let's place it. So I'm going to place it right here. So I'm going to go to my level template. I'm going to add in another one of these organizing nodes. So it's just a simple node. I'm going to call this spawners, or bystander spawners if you like. I'm just going to call it spawners. At least I would do if I'd written spawners. There we go. And I'm going to put it there just to be neat. Great. So we now have, if I just minimize that, something called spawners. Let's instance one in. I'm going to instance in a bystander spawner. And it's right in the center there. I'm going to drag it out to the edge. And so we'll go up a meter, and that's where they're going to spawn. We could probably go up a little bit higher, but you know what? I'll worry about that later. I'm going to come off snap and just go to the edge a bit. All right, so right now this doesn't do anything. I'm just going to show you what it looks like in world. And because this isn't any kind of physics body, it has no collision, so I can run through it. It's just there to help me place things. So here's the forward. That's the direction it's facing. We now need to start placing things. In order to do that, we need to give our bystander spawner a script. So a brand new script, and it's going in the bystander main folder, not in the figures folder. And it needs a few things. First, let's connect our timer. And now we can start making the rest of the script. We need the maximum amount of time that you can exist between figures being spawned. So I'm going to put an export variable just so I can change it if I need to. And I'm going to say 5 seconds. That feels good to me, but your mileage may vary. We need the speed that they travel at. I'm going to make this a constant because it doesn't change at runtime. And I think 10 is pretty good. One more thing we're going to do, we're going to be using file grabbers. So I need a dictionary to store the information in. So we have our bystanders, and they're going to go into a dictionary. Okay, let's give ourselves some space, stop slurring our words, and make a ready function. Hello, ready function. Great. Okay, so let's define bystanders. Our bystanders is equal to filegrabber dot get files, and now we need to actually grab that folder. Now, be careful here. Do not grab this folder. These are meshes. I don't want meshes. I want scenes. That's right here. So I'm going to go to bystander figures. I'm going to copy path, put it between these quotes. Boom. Okay, we have random stuff happening. So I'm going to run randomize. And I want to set the timer. I'm going to do this at runtime. It's going to be different every time we fire a new bystander. So let's make a new function called set timer. Function set timer. And what I want to do is get the timer, and get its wait time, which is a property within the timer. And I'm going to use random integer. I'm going to modulo by max wait time. Now be careful. This is going to give us a value between 0 and this -1, right? If I'm asking you to pick a random integer modulo by 5, which is what I'm doing here, then it's going to give me 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. But I don't want a 0-second wait time, so I'm going to add 1, which gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. You can change these values, but that's what I'm happy with. Now, what do we do on timer? Well, I want to do two things. The first thing I want to do is actually set the timer. The second thing I want to do is spawn. Now, we don't currently have a function called spawn, but it's going to be very similar to our projectile function. So let's make a spawn function. And what this does is spawn bystanders. It doesn't relive a particularly gory comic from the 90s. It makes a bystander. So let's give ourselves a little bit more room. I'd like to say you're welcome to the 9 of you who got the spawn reference there. Variable bystander, single bystander, is equal to load bystanders. And this is a dictionary, so which one do I want? Well, let's get a random integer. Well, we don't want an infinite random integer. We have a maximum number, so let's define that by the bystander dot size. Let's close that array. That's which key is that in the dictionary. And we're going to close that load function, but we want this as an instance. Okay, so let's add the bystander to the scene. So add child bystander. And we did this recently, so bystander.set as top level, because this is going to move. And I don't want it to move in relation to and I want it to move independently. So set as top level, which looks like that, and that is a true. Okay, now it's going to spawn at the front point. So let's go bystander dot global transform is equal to forward. Looks like I forgot to actually rename that node, so let's do that real quick. Position 3D is actually called forward. Save that and go back in. Is equal to dot global transform. Okay, now we need to know the direction we're firing, so I'm going to make a variable called spawner forward. And that's the global transform dot basis. So that's the axis we want, is this one. And I want that normalized. Finally, let's apply a linear velocity. So bystanders dot linear velocity is the spawner forward multiplied by the speed constant. Okay. Couple of things. One, this won't currently work, and the reason why is the timer isn't starting. So let's put that on auto start. So it's going to automatically start. The moment it finishes, it'll then set a new wait time and start all over again. Second thing is the food won't actually trigger the die animation yet, and I'll show you why in a second. But let's bring that in and see if we get something spawning. Whoosh. Kind of. Needs to be a little bit higher, doesn't it? Okay, that's fine. Let's bring you a little bit higher, so back to level 1. And just tweak that up a little bit. Let's see how that goes. Much better. Okay, now, when I fire food at them, they don't fade, they don't scream. Why not? Well, 2 reasons. 1, bystander is waiting for... where are you? There we go. Bystander is waiting for the hurt function. No one's calling that. And the projectile isn't actually going to set off the hurt function yet. So let's fix those 2 things. To fix those, I'm going to go down to my projectile scene, which is right here. Yep, in the right place. And let's give this a script. So brand new script in projectiles. And what I want is when the projectile hits something, it needs to run this script. So to do that, I'm going to wire in the signal, specifically body shape entered. So I'm going to connect that to itself. And what I want to do here is check if the thing it's hitting has a hurt method. If it does, then I'm going to go if body, which is defined right here in an argument, dot has method hurt. In other words, if whatever I'm hitting has that method, then react. Well, what do we want to do? Well, we're going to tell body, you are now hurt. And then I'm going to get rid of the food. Now, we don't have to get rid of the food. You can have ricochets. I'm going to get rid of the food. That is entirely up to you. This still won't work, and I'll show you why. Well, first I'll give you an example. Okay, so why is that not working? Because if I go back to my projectile, I need to actually report the contacts. Right now, we're not reporting collisions, we're just colliding. I'm going to go to contact monitor on and then switch the context reported to 1. I only want the first thing. If you were doing lots and lots and lots of physics objects, you could do more than that. But let's take a look.
Oh no! Oh no!
Come on. Come on. You can do it. Help if I can actually hit them. Let's hit this one.
Oh no!
And he shrinks. Fantastic. Okay. I'm going to add in one more of these spawners. I'm going to be a little bit careful because they're going to collide because they're a little bit bigger than that doorway. But let's go to my bystander spawner and move you to about here. Where is that? I think minus 0.4 is about as good as it's going to get. Now, I think they're still going to collide. Can we make minus 0.45? Ooh, let's find out. If we can, this might work. Ooh, we have a little bit of leeway. Can we make minus 0.5? I don't think we can. I think I may have... No, we're good. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate you. I'm going to take the duplicate. And I'm going to move you to 0.5 on the positive and positive 27. And don't forget to rotate this on the y-axis. Otherwise, you're firing the wrong direction. Okay, let's see if that works. What I want is them both to cross. Ha 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 ha! I'm pretty happy with that. Now, you can add more doors. You can randomly shoot at these poor people. But I am pretty happy with that. They're actually quite hard to hit. I think that's a really good place to end this video. So, excellent work, and I'll see you in the next one.